I'd like to introduce the panel. If you could introduce yourselves, in fact, as we go around.
So my name's Carl Sargison. I work at Arts Apprentices, part of the Creative Pioneers group, and deliver digital, creative, IT and professional apprenticeships based in Manchester, as well as London, Birmingham and Bristol. We've enrolled now over 4,500 apprentices across our different programmes, working with numerous employers, including large and small. We're an Ofsted Grade 1 training provider, and my role within Arts is to liaise with employers mainly across the North West region, liaise with them about developing and bringing in new talent, i.e. apprentices, or developing their existing staff and upskilling their workforce. Just a little bit of personal background. I actually started as an apprentice myself, which was in 2005, and I've worked in the apprenticeship sector ever since then. So I've seen a lot of different changes over the last 13, 14 years.
I'm Gareth Ellis-Unwin, current head of film at Screen Skills. My former professional life, up till 6 months ago, was I ran my own production company. So I ran a company called Bedlam Film Productions in London. We'd produced half a dozen feature films. Probably the biggest hit people know of was the King's Speech. Ex-First AD, that was my personal background. Got to the point, though, sort of 12 years ago, where I thought I knew more than the producers I was working for, so decided to step over to the dark side, as my friends referred to it. But no, had a really happy and healthy first career as a first AD, got to work on Peter and the Wolf with Susie Sempleton, and then went on to line produce something for Hugh that just turned into the biggest thing Wood had ever seen in terms of a project. But yeah, that's my personal history.
I'm Ben Elson. I'm here from the Manchester College. I'm a tutor and lecturer across creative media, but mainly in computer game development, animation, and also been a big part of the Ideas Foundation Employability Bootcamp link-up that's been going on for the last sort of 2 years. Come from the dark, murky world of formal education and compulsory and all these horrible terms, and trying to bring that there is another side to it all, and we are doing things slightly differently as well to try and fit in with this wonderful world, because we don't always do that very well. So
No. Okay, great, thank you. So if we could move the slideshow on. Thank you. So we are going to talk a little bit about entry-level talent in animation and production within animation specifically, and the barriers that we currently have as an industry to getting people and getting work-ready talent within animation. Brief overview with Brown Bag. I've seen this as a specific problem working within L&D alongside our HR department. This year we doubled our workforce for the new project that we're working on, and employed almost 70 new staff across creative, so that's design and animation, etc., and also within production. Out of those staff, around 45% of those have had to be recruited outside of the EU, which on short-term contracts, as I'm sure everyone is aware, paying visas on short-term contracts. Oh my goodness, isn't it good that we earn so much money? Yeah, so a staggering issue around talent. My history, I come from, I started out my career many years ago as an actor, and then went into recruitment and L&D. I've worked massively across the visitor economy sectors, and actually very recently was working for People First, the Sector Skills Council for the visitor economy. And I can honestly say that over the 29 years that I've been working within learning and development, never have I seen such a deficit of talent at entry level. So obviously it's quite poignant for me to be here, and certainly since I started at Brown Bag Films, there's been very much a focus on actually, let's not just look at solving the problem today. It's a problem that clearly needs solving as we go on. And Gareth, you mentioned 4,500 people, is it, that you've got to get recruited?
No, 10,000 new entrants, returners or crossers over us. I mean, we are in a boom period, and I always try and sort of temper some of this conversation around the fact that it's not just that the front end of the pipeline is broken, you know, and even that is a questionable statement. You know, we are in a boom period at the moment. I personally remember from my AD days when Band of Brothers was shooting over here, they just sucked the top 14 crews out of the workforce, and for 2.5 years they all shot around Leavesden, and then when Band of Brothers left, suddenly everyone sort of dropped back into their regular positions. I loved it. I mean, I could play up a division for a short period of time. But I do, I do recognise that there are some real key issues around that front end of the talent delivery pipeline. And one of the sort of stats that someone shared with me, one of the senior employers, was that they felt from the point of graduation to being considered fully work ready, fully baked, you know, able to take on a serious workload and be trusted to complete that it's about an 18-month lag at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, I do think industry has a part to play. You will always have to bring talent on. You can't expect someone to walk out of an education establishment on day one and on day two be running, you know, running departments. But it's the connectivity between what the employers need and what the higher education and other forms of education, apprenticeships and others, can offer. And I think that the solution probably lies in a matrix of it all. Sorry, I didn't mean to sort of kill the discussion. Don't go dead. Right? Yeah, we've all just got to get a lot. No, but it's an incredibly complex thing. You know, so for example, one of the challenges I get is that people are still used to crewing very late. I know it's different in animation; you're on a longer production schedule, but we get phone calls on a Friday night where people want CVs of trainees for a Monday morning start, and it's like that's an imbalance. You know, I know things are different in some of these longer running shows. But yes, there's definitely work to be done.
There is. So let's look at what we can do at the beginning. So we have obviously two buying options here as far as entry-level talent. We'll come on to, you know, kind of upskilling and CPD a little bit further on. But certainly from entry-level, we've got FE and we've got apprenticeships.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my hand up and say I'm apprenticeships all day long. Sorry. We are in very much a creative industry. I'm trained to deliver and understand psychometrics. And what we understand is that with most creatives, especially artistic creatives, is that they aren't necessarily people who lean towards classroom-based learning. And the issue that we've got with FE is that we can be, or we are in the position where a lot of people, particularly school leavers, who would perhaps really blossom and be fantastic members of staff within animation in particular, are not even coming into the industry because the only option for them to get to that point is to go through the animation BA, MA route and then come on, and as you said, Gareth, then spend 18 months learning the ropes before they can get to a point where they're, you know, kind of really work ready, where you're talking about people then who are then 23, 24, whereas potentially we could be looking at apprentices coming in at grassroots level.
16, 18,
Yeah.
And what we are finding now, for those that don't maybe know the apprenticeship world, so previously apprenticeships were delivered under an old framework model which kind of concentrated on really the theoretical side of an apprenticeship. So not just in this sector but others as well, what a lot of employers felt was once they've completed their apprenticeship, they weren't necessarily competent in what they set out to do. They just had the skills, but they weren't necessarily competent. So over the last 2-3 years, I'm sure you might have heard that there's been a lot of revamp across apprenticeships, including apprenticeship standards now. And a big focus of apprenticeship standards is actually looking at the competence of the individual. So you still have the knowledge and the theoretical side to an apprenticeship programme, whereas now it does focus on the competence. So you're unable to pass your apprenticeship programme unless you've demonstrated competence in the workplace, and it's to the employer's satisfaction as well. And another thing with apprenticeship standards is that the qualifications now have been written by people in industry. So there's tons and tons now of apprenticeship standards that are being released at level 3 and level 4, which are quite high levels, and they are being written by people within the industry, whereas previously the old framework model was written by people in education. So moving forward, we've certainly seen an improvement over the last 18 months to 2 years since the standards have come in, and as I mentioned before, there's new standards that are consistently being written and being published by the sectors themselves. So we are seeing improvements slowly, but I think surely.
So from an FE perspective, what is it that we can do, or FE can do, to kind of combat these issues which Gareth pointed out is the work-ready status
I'm
of
certainly
those
not going
sort of 18
to defend
months?
FE broadly.
Oh, you can?
No. I mean, I've been in FE.
I went the FE route.
Yeah. No, it's a wonderful thing. It really is. It's just such a vulnerable form of education to so many different things. I mean, from a subject point of view, which I think's kind of the way you have to reassure yourself by looking at it from the industry you're looking at, not the sector more broadly in education, it's about the first encounter with what the subject is. And I think most people encounter it and fall in love with it, or whatever it is their experience is, without really knowing what it is that they're falling in love with. They don't think of it as a job. It's a skill or an activity or just a moment, from clicking a camera to drawing something or seeing it move. We take a real broad range of students who've had some amazing encounters with creativity and digital creativity, and we also take a huge amount who have no encounters. And when you've got a class of 20 and they're all still at different points in making it, yet you still want the same end goal for everybody, it's really, really difficult to offer that experience to every single person that comes in. And we end up with this system of your superstars, the ones that you're really proud of because they've moved on but they're not really quite ready yet and they need more time, and then they finish and then you don't have the control over them anymore. And what we would always like is to, have them as puppets for another 2 years through degrees or through apprenticeships to finish the journey that we see. I think a big issue with further education is the other pressures that come into it are deemed more important than the outcome from an industry point of view. Not helped by the fact that we have to work to an awarding body. I don't want to go into too much about naming awarding bodies or what they do, but essentially, I mean, in animation terms, there is no directive of animation on one of the main awarding bodies in this country. And there is no one helping content. Now, unfortunately, schools and colleges have the same problem, is they often need more guidance than anyone else, and it doesn't come from the main thing that our job is to do in the day. So we are reliant on outside people. We've been very lucky the last few years. We've moved to an awarding body which lets us dictate content, and it's changed everything. We've actually managed to set up for the first time in 8 years a dedicated animation course, and we're having students now being recognised from outside, and it's just letting people who enjoy the subject create a story for every single learner that is focused on it, because some people actually don't believe you should be doing something as focused as animation or graphic design or games. If you go across, most further education colleges run creative media, and if anyone can tell me what creative media actually is, please, we'll run those courses. But
the interesting question is at what point does that professionalisation kick in?
Absolutely.
Or be a requirement? Because, I would never champion the fact that young people shouldn't be afforded the opportunity for that sort of sheltered workshop learning. I did 2 years FE at Weymouth and then went to Ravensbourne and did 2 years there to get my HND. And if I hadn't had the freedoms afforded to me at Weymouth, I definitely wouldn't have flourished as well as I did at Ravensbourne, because by the time I got to Ravensbourne, I had a better sense of where I was going and what I wanted to do. Interesting enough on the apprenticeship side of things, apprenticeships has become a bit of a industry shorthand for fixing the problem. The problem is getting new talent that's capable and competent. And apprenticeships with a capital A, what you're talking about, the standards and all of that, has improved. But until we can get government to unlock the levy, and yet again we were disappointed in the recent budget that there wasn't movement there, you've got these really significant employers that have a pay bill that is contributing to this central pot. They have staff they want to train, but because they can't get it out through the digital voucher system working effectively, that money is just lost to our industry, and that's money that we, by stealth or directly, pay into that pot. When I talk about apprenticeships, I quite often try and loosen the phrase to include vocational training and the opportunity to go and study something that isn't just chalk and talk. We've got something that's going through at the moment where we've been working with a couple of lighting companies, and for a very long time, the apprenticeship standard for electrical, the only one that would be asked for by productions, I might misquote this, it's like the B2SO9 or something, and that is the electrical contractor thing that you would go and build houses with. Yet we speak to MBS Lighting in Pinewood and they say, well, 75% of the equipment these kids are working with don't have a plug on it. I don't need someone that can wire a boiler or put a solar panel on a roof. I need someone that can start a Jenny when it doesn't.
And funnily enough, when we were talking at Brown Bag, when we were asking the question around level 3 animation, we were told to use the creative digital apprenticeship, the digital content level 3, which actually anyone who's got any understanding of what an apprenticeship framework looks like, and actually the education, animation is very much a creative subject where we do it to obviously a client brief, and there's usually a story running through it. digital content is more about marketing. It's a marketing tool, and that's not what we're in the business of doing, unless obviously you're writing adverts, obviously. But actually, for a company like Brown Bag, that absolutely does not fit the criteria, and yet it was being pushed back from the Institute for Apprenticeships with them saying, well, actually, that should cover it.
Yeah.
But actually, it doesn't. It doesn't. And where's the value for either us as an employer or for a young person going through that?
It means there's no structure that you can rely upon. You don't really have the ability to criticise it because it's not really the right one in the first place. And that makes it really hard for me to sit here and either defend or attack what I do, because it's not really what I would want to do, and it doesn't really make sense in that point of view. And what you end up with is some very, very well-intentioned, hard-working people doing the very best they can with what they've got. And yes, you get the odd superstar coming through, and we've had some amazing success stories of students being offered work across the world. But it's not everyone, and it's not everyone's opportunity, and it doesn't allow us to, like I said, the end point, it's never going to be the same for everybody, but we should be able to assure people more that we know what they're working towards, so we can judge them by that standard. And if they're not ready to go out in the industry, they'll find another route to bridge the gap. But you should know what they've done.
It's accepting that there is within each of these schemes, whether it's ages or stages, there is a natural conclusion to that person's time, either on an apprenticeship or on an FE course or on an HE course or on an induction something. And something we're trying to promote is that there's a lot of, when someone's under a duty of care, there tends to be a lot of support and sort of resource put into that individual. But what happens is it's the connective tissue between the stages. So it's someone coming up and through different means by which to get to that work readiness stage. And, you know, work readiness is a real issue, because it's not just about the skills you've learnt to do the job. Maturity kicks in. You know, where are you in your own life journey? You know, I'm very keen to point out it's not just by age. You know, I know some 25-year-olds that I would trust less than some 16-year-olds. You know, so it's not just ages and it's not just ages, it's stages. But also, you know, the soft skills that need to go around training that individual. I mean, we've got a big driver at the moment, and there's four barriers to entry that we readily recognise. One is geographical location. If you don't live near production or the creative world, it's difficult to get access. Two, you have to know someone on the inside, unless, you know, your dad or your mum plays golf with someone down the road, then you won't get in on the inside. You know, third one is you can't be what you can't see. So a lot of the work we're doing is, you know, being very careful who we put up as champions and ambassadors in terms of trying to encourage that next generation. And lastly, it's the maturity that's required to be able to go into a company with confidence, interview well, know what to do on the first day when you get there. And I think there's a shared responsibility in that. It's not just down to, I mean, I noticed that we haven't got anyone from HE on the
Well, I'd like to say, actually, I teach in HE as well.
You do?
Yeah, we run foundation degrees, not necessarily degrees, with the focus really being on the technical and the practical and productive. I mean, we've got the Manchester Film School, who represent a studio. They work like a studio. There's no formal sit-down. Here's the units going through handbooks over and over again. They make films, real films, and you take on a role and you learn that role. And if you know what, you have to work your way up as well. You have to pitch your ideas. It's quite remarkable how the HE sector is very much like what the FE sector was several years ago. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But I find there's a lot of those students who, again, age is not that relevant in this. It's your point in the process and where you are. And some do need more time. To get
Interestingly, I did a mock interview this morning, so something that Brown Bag do, a mock interview. They interviewed me. No, I was interviewing a Year 10 student who is
in
really
old money.
into
In old money, what's that?
In old money, she's fourth year. She's a fourth year.
Okay, right.
She is. So she had contacted me because she wanted work experience for school. So, and she's an artist and is really interested in animation. She went to her National Careers Advisor in school, and obviously they told her that chasing a creative subject is an absolute waste of time anyway. There's no money in it and there's no businesses out there, and, you know.
Only just the £7.2 billion worth of contribution to GDP.
You need maths and English, though, don't you? Maths and English. It's just maths and English.
Absolutely. But the point is, at the age of 15, she was incredibly mature. She'd actually gone to the point where she had sourced a work experience opportunity herself.
Which is good for under 16 because of all of the safeguarding issues. That's really difficult to land.
Yeah, exactly. She did have the right form and all the rest of it. Obviously, the school had given her all the details, but she came in front of me and she did a really good interview. And a lot of what we do is around our entire pipeline. So I give them a talk through on, actually, this is our... it starts here with a client brief and it goes through these 11 stages before we get to the point where we're at delivery, and talk through all of that, and then we talk about what would be the best pathway for her, whether it was for production or whether it was down the creative, artistic route. And she was really, really mature. And actually someone like her, and I think this is the point around doing that analysis at first point, and actually employers have got to take some responsibility for this and actually say, well, do you know what, as an industry, we want to encourage people into our industry. The schools aren't doing a huge amount to do that, so actually we've got a responsibility to offer opportunities to them.
And that's why we're going into the cinemas. I mean, when I started at Screen Skills, our CEO said, what's the one thing that you think would make a really strong statement about trying to recruit to the screen sector? And I went, you've got to be where the eyeballs are. You have to either be in the cinemas or on the screens or on the devices, because otherwise it's, you know, it's just lost in that miasma of all of those other jobs that are out there. So
We have had some success. You know, we'll shout about it.
Hooray!
Several years ago, I met someone at an event which is all about skills, and we got discussing about the impending compulsory work-related programs going into 16 to 18, and a lot of these are PowerPoint slides on how to get a job and what to wear, and they break my heart to sit and see them. And we realised then it wasn't going to work. And through, again, you know, well-intentioned people with lots of endeavour and hard work, we've created a slightly different programme with the Ideas Foundation, and that is definitely for creative sectors, and we think it could be for all creative students across all levels, because FE as well is not just level 3, it's your level 2 resitters, and then down to a level 1, and some of the things produced on a learner who has essentially not been that successful in this education system is incredible. And when we had someone win a nationwide animation competition from a level 1 course, beating level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 and level 6 students as well, which was, we were stunned when that message came through. But the bootcamp, the idea is to pair people with a mentor from industry. And it's the most amazing, rewarding thing that's been set up. There's a lot of hard work going into it. Belinda over there has done a lot of phone calls, contacts and begging and favours. Yeah. And it's been the most, it's the one thing that I've seen advance people the most. And at the end of it, they don't just assume they're going to go into university, because that's what everyone else does. They're wanting to get jobs. They're wanting to go be a part of it. And you said about what you see, and that is absolutely correct, and that's what they see. The difficulty we're obviously going to face is there's a finite number of people with a finite amount of time, and it's not really part of our compulsory system, but we want to make it part of the compulsory system.
Well, hopefully when we get our mentoring, UK-wide mentoring scheme up on its feet, you know, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. I mean, one of the things that we introduced to our trainee programme, Trainee Finder, just 2 years ago was that the graduating cohort had to commit a certain amount of time to the incoming cohort through the year after. So they were people that had that near experience. They were only 1 year on in their career from where the current cohort were. And we saw some brilliant relationships sort of develop through that, and people get picked up for work and other bits and pieces. So I think mentoring is, you know, it's a really solid thing when it works well. You know, it can be incredibly encouraging.
It's been, I mean, I've been in education for this is the 11th year, and it's the single most successful, effective thing I've seen done.
Yeah.
And it does take people, you know, people staying behind late. No one begrudges that, but you do have to do that. A lot of organisation, a lot of ringing round, a lot of sorting things out. And if we'd just like someone who has far more power than I do, and far more, it's beyond colleges themselves, into government and beyond, to say there are different ways of doing this.
Yeah.
But look at the good, and let's start. You know, we have so many companies come into our college offering things that go nowhere. Because when it comes to it, there's no match up. They don't always understand what it is. I have to be honest, sometimes it's a tick box affair because it looks good to be doing these things. And that's really frustrating when you take 3 hours out of class on a Tuesday afternoon and you're told there's this great event on, and you get there and the people are just going through the motions. And that's really frustrating because that's being paid for by someone, and we'd like to be a bit more involved in where it could be spent better.
Finding means by which you can sort of enliven that world, you know. I mean, I sort of mentioned in the chat before this, you know, I can sit and listen to certain luminaries of our industry talk for a day, but that doesn't necessarily mean a lot to a young person that's looking at that first gig or that first opportunity. And I think, getting the industry, and we're working hard on it, and we are seeing not just green shoots, some real hard work going into this, getting the industry to recognise that actually giving back a little bit does come round full circle. You will find those remarkable workers, you will find those great case studies and opportunities. So there is a part to play there.
Absolutely. And go on, you were...
No, I was just going to say, Ben mentioned then about power is higher than us taking an effect and trying to improve things, and that's what's kind of happened. Going back to apprenticeship, that's what's kind of happened with apprenticeships and the apprenticeship standards now. Employers felt that they weren't effectively getting enough from an apprentice, or enough competence or enough skills from the individual once they've completed. So this is why the revamp of all the standards have come in, and we are, I think, as I said before, I think we are seeing the improvements to
There are
to that
definite
as well.
improvements with the apprenticeship standards instead of the old frameworks. Frameworks were obviously prescribed. They were an off the peg. You bought an apprentice and it
written
came
by
off
people
the
in
peg.
education that probably never worked in the
absolutely.
sector. And,
Someone in an ivory tower thought that looked like a really good idea. Yeah, absolutely. And
Creative and digital media was one of them, actually.
And the new standards are written by industry. And it's really important to mention the fact that actually an apprenticeship for the BBC doing one thing is going to look completely different to an apprenticeship at Brown Bag. Now, they might both be animation apprenticeships, but they can look totally and utterly different. And that's the beauty of the new apprenticeship standards, which brings us on to apprenticeships in animation. So, what have we got available for us at the moment? Yes.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of standards that are being developed at the moment. If we're talking specifically about what we do, it's content, digital, and on the software side, software development, software testing as well.
So do you deliver animation apprenticeships?
The answer is no.
Nope. Do you know how many people in the Northwest do deliver animation apprenticeships?
I don't.
It's a big fat zero.
Right.
Okay, it's a big fat zero. And actually, when we talk about the standards that are currently in development, we have a level 4 junior animator apprenticeship in development, which has been in development for the last 2 years, hasn't actually moved a huge amount since then. And was actually regraded from a level 7, so a foundation degree, down to level 4, which is level 7 postgraduate to level 4 foundation degree. So that's okay for a college leaver, potentially, to go into that. They could go into that as a junior animator. Okay, but it's not ready. And when it does become ready, for all of these wonderful employers who are in the room who are thinking, fantastic, I'm going to employ animation apprentices.
Yeah.
Who's going to deliver that?
Yeah, and that's
But then that's kind of where we come in.
Yeah.
Please do. Please tell us how that can happen.
No, well, I was just thinking then, I mean, we have some experience with the old apprenticeship system, didn't have a particularly positive experience assessing, working within, and etc. And it was oil and water. The two systems don't necessarily work that well together. And it's always seemed ridiculous to have classroom-based delivering assessment and non-classroom-based delivery kept separate. When essentially you're trying to do the same thing and not even having the same people involved in and out of those rooms.
And the qualification is exactly the same
identical.
at the end now. The certificate is the same. The awarding body is the same.
I mean, the one thing I would love to see more is the flexibility to move in and out of an opportunity or even a subject. Because the pressure financially on every centre for someone to complete is so high that might actually be the expense of not taking an opportunity around. And actually, the one thing I would like at 4, 5 and 6, level 4, 5 and 6 is to jump off your degree because you've realised it's not what you thought. There's no financial penalty in doing so and moving on to something else, which is of an equal opportunity that might suit you. And we have to give people more opportunity to move from one to the next. And we see that, I mean, at schools now, there is such little diversity in the subjects that they're teaching. That's filtering through up the system through, and even then in a higher education system now as well, it's the same thing is happening again. And just to give someone more choice in what they're doing is the ultimate thing in it. Or I mean, what we'll end up in, and we are finally doing it. We're starting a level 4 animation course next year because there's a demand, but the demand's probably there because there's not a work-based system in place to sweep it up instead.
Yeah.
So we will offer it there to students, and we'll do our version of
Yeah.
it, and it'll be great. We'll have a great time, and there'll be opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's because of the vacuum that we're able to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
I know I'm,
Yeah.
cutting my nose off to spite my face, but that is the reality of it. Is we will step in and do something that what people won't.
And it's important to
point.
remember as well with apprenticeships, they're not necessarily for someone who's just coming in to do their first job. We could have somebody who's been working in computer animation within a gaming company who's come over into animation and needs to understand the different ways that we work. And actually they can do that within the workplace. They may be in their late 20s, 30s.
Yeah, we're finding the age
you know?
demographic is over the last 2-3 years or so, it's certainly increasing to people in their 20s and even 30s now. So yeah, that's a good point to raise, certainly.
We've got people on Trainee Finder that are over 30 years, a couple of people that are returners and stuff. I mean, what I find interesting is your comments around what you might look for in an apprentice at Brown Bag could be quite different from an apprentice within the same grade from a different employer. I'm just wondering, as a group, you know, how we feel or what we think about, because it's one of those interesting things. I sometimes come to events like this, and half the room are all about standardisation, and the other half of the room are about employability and malleability to be able to shape someone to be ready for their organisation. I'm just sort of slightly torn as to, you know,
so let's pretend.
Yeah.
We like playing pretend. Let's pretend that we're not talking about apprenticeships. We're just talking about hiring someone. You're going to hire someone. Yeah. They've done, so you've got, I don't know, four potential recruits in front of you. One's done 2 years at the BBC, one's done 2 years with Brown Bag, one's done 2 years with Studio Lydell, one's done 2 years somewhere else. Yeah. Does it matter where they've done their apprenticeship? Or does it matter more about what they've gained through the job? What questions are you going to ask them as an employer? There's no difference. There's no difference whether that's through employment or whether it's through an apprenticeship, because
I suppose the question then for me would be, by the time you get to the end of that 2 years, what are the skills that you're expecting to have in a person, and are they broader work readiness skills, or are they actually very specific technical skills? Because, for example, a recent event similar to this a few months ago, I was challenged on the fact that there was not enough X-grade people that knew Y piece of software. And it was like, well, that's your employer decision to use that software. So as a company, you've gone down a certain path. Now, don't you then have some responsibility over conversion there?
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, I going back to my hiring days at Bedlam, if I hired an editor and I'd done a post deal and that meant they had to cut on Avid and they were Final Cut background, I would have to pay for that conversion course if I wanted that editor. So for me, I'm wondering, what are those, when we say there's a vacuum and that we're desperately missing a worker of a given type,
well,
what is that?
It's whether you're judging whether someone can be a brilliant contributor towards the industry or a brilliant contributor towards that seat in your studio right now where you've got a gap to fill. But I did have quite a heated argument at something like this when I said to them, well, I understand you've got a chair to fill in your studio, but you cannot criticise the entire system because you can't find that one specific person to do what you do.
We
That's
just
really
had a really horrible
frustrating
situation when we had 3 trainees that got sacked, and it was really, really clear after some investigation that they were basically using trainees to fill what should have been paid jobs.
Yeah, and you mentioned about them using, you know, specific platforms and systems for that particular business, and that makes it very difficult for people in education to train people just in that particular line of work.
And it's constantly evolving. I mentioned Phil had given us a hand with some of the VFX job grades on our website from NextGen, and he introduced me to a whole new grade I'd never heard of, a groom artist. Now, I've been working in film and TV for 20 plus years, and I'd never come across that. So obviously, as technology's advancing and workflows are changing, there are going to be these emerging positions that, you know, if we accept that there is a lag between industry and education, which is understandable, then that
either the equipment, software suppliers to it need to be part of this conversation, because it's incredibly expensive to do a lot of these things, and whilst a lot of them are more accessible than ever before, it's still really expensive. And as a 16-year-old, with all the best intentions in the world, you've got to have a certain piece of equipment with a certain thing on to do the certain thing that's being taught. And the fact of the matter is, and especially in around Manchester, is it's just not there. It's just not there. And it's, you know, there's some of the licensing for colleges is ridiculous. It's absolutely the biggest cost that we have. And it's a cost of a member of staff, a good member of staff of that. Yet there are examples.
And that's even with educational discounts and whatever clever wheezes that you can...
I've got a comparison because I also work in computer games. In computer games, I mean, that's become, say, democratised. It's essentially become free for people to do. And people starting companies and then paying for the software and then generating a whole new field and industry. And you just wish we could learn a little bit from what the other areas are doing in that field to realise that if you give more at that earlier stage, you know, no one's making money from it as a 16-year-old with an Adobe whatever license. But it's very, very hard to respond then. It's very hard to change to software. We like new software, we like new toys, we like to play with them. But we want to make sure we're playing with the same toys that are being played with in any studio that's out there as well. And we tend to find we're 2 years behind.
Though this is an issue that is the same if we were talking about IT apprenticeships. I'm sure you've been in this situation, Carl, where someone will ask for a specific piece of software.
They haven't necessarily coding language that they want the individual to have. And,
So this isn't an animation only issue. That's something that you would see overarching over IT apprenticeships as well. So and that would bring you on to the other issue of if we come on to apprenticeships of actually finding assessors and tutors who are capable of doing that. I'll use IT as an example, and this has been an issue, and I'm sure you'll back me up here, for many, many years, is that IT apprenticeship providers haven't been able to go out and deliver quality apprenticeships because they've not had IT assessors and tutors who are up to date with the understanding of the current landscape when it comes to IT. Because if they were up to date, they would be working in the industry probably for 3 times as much money as they are as an assessor, because colleges and apprenticeship providers can't afford to pay that sort of money. And the same could be said for animation.
What we've had to do, and I'm going to use an example from a different sector, so this is physical production and particularly the grip department. So we've had a bit of a sea change with how we help the grip training. For a very, very long time, it was unlicensed. I mean, there was just, and as health and safety has become more important, it became really, really clear that some form of standardised qualification needed to go in. And the solution was found in an MVQ. So there's basically 2-level MVQ grip training and 1 crane. And it was recognised that there are many factors that come to bear, and one of them was the assessors. And the assessors that were doing the assessments had to get paid the same day rate as if they were doing a day's grip work, because otherwise it's a loss of earnings. But what we also recognise within that is that as soon as someone can get their level 2, level 3 grip ticket, they're earning a certain amount of money for every day that they're working. So we do expect there to be a participant contribution. So it's a sort of a funding share between industry, ourselves and the individual. And some of this, I think, you know, the solutions will be found with those sort of partnership arrangements where we're not just landing it in the lap of the Autodesks of this world. We're not just landing it in the lap of Brown Bag. We're not saying that all HE and FE is not fit for purpose or the apprenticeships don't work.
Absolutely.
It's trying to find, and it's the Gaudian knot at the moment, and everyone is talking about skills at the moment. I mean, I spoke at an event in China 3 weeks ago. I was actually shooting in the US last year where we ran out of crew. There was just, because Atlanta was so busy, there was 5 grades that we couldn't populate, so we had to bring people over state lines, paying accommodation, paying per diems and all of those sort of things. So, you know.
Yeah, and I know for us, and I probably can't speak for every provider out there, but the what we call learning development coaches, you might know them as assessors in the previous world, are people, the one that we have, are people that are sector specific, so people that have worked in, if it's software that we're delivering, they've worked in the software industry previously, or they've got a relative degree, or they do come from a variety of backgrounds, but the majority of them have worked in that particular sector previously, or at least in the last few years. So they may have gone from sector to maybe then teaching at a college or university, and then come into a training provider. So I can't speak for every single provider out there, but certainly for us, they are sector-specific people that we have in terms of tutors.
No, the alternative is, I mean, I do a lot of work with an awarding body, going to other colleges, blah, 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 and it's taught me so much about different areas that I do feel confident going into other subject areas. And if it's written in a way that is supported by the awarding body of
Yeah.
the work. You can have somebody with not industry experience go and do the assessment.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
of
how
course.
it's written, and unfortunately a lot of the stuff that is out there right now requires so much informal modernisation or interpreting that you tend to have someone who knows what they're doing there. And I think, particularly in the compulsory level, you know, what we're giving to the schools and into the colleges and even then to universities is so important, because I think that's the starting point, and that's my first encounter for everyone. Not going to be the same in every single situation. I think in an apprenticeship situation you would want someone who could say, yeah, they've done this and this. But there's also a lot of people who are making decisions and judgments where they're not really got experience in that. And I think I'd encourage any, you know, teachers are terrible. We get stuck in classrooms and little hutches and we live in them and they become their own little world. They're like a silo. We'll go out and about, go and see what other places are doing, go and spend some time in studios and learn what the whole world's doing, not just what an awarding body's doing or what a school or a college or even one company's doing, but go and see a big, broad range of things.
I mean, that awareness and cross-pollinisation is I think, key or a big part of these solutions. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time talking to peers in other industries, and you always find this sort of really interesting disconnect. So one of the closest industries to ours in terms of government speak and how it's viewed is the construction industry, and how they work with apprenticeships and how they do their training. And the construction industry training board sits alongside the film industry training board. And I talk to these colleagues, and we you know, they talk about initiatives that get in 50,000 chippies and 50,000 sparks, and you know, and then we're looking at our shortages. And our shortages, I mean, if it's recognised that within film and high-end TV, you're looking at about a workforce of 150,000 people. They think when you extend it out to include sports, factual, news, shiny floor, live end, you know, all of those other things, you're probably talking about a labour force that's still under 500,000.
Yeah.
So when we talk about these big government national super solutions, it has to be able to be scaled back down to what is actually quite a very productive, well-functioning, making a lot of money for this country, but quite a sort of boutique activity.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you've spoken to us about what Screen Skills are doing. How can we move forward from where we are now? Because there's a few things that you mentioned that certainly at Brown Bag I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of boot camps. I wasn't aware of trainees, and those are things that certainly as one of the largest studios we would be more than happy to facilitate. Mentorships, for instance, at Brown Bag we run our own internal mentorships which go which are at several different levels. So we do peer-to-peer, where actually somebody who might be in scene setup can go and be mentored by someone in animation. And you know, so that it's almost like a sideways mentorship, if you like, rather than an elevated one. But those are opportunities that we as an industry, we as a company, are more than happy to offer out to other companies, businesses. You know, because you know, we're something like 80% built up. Our industry is about 80% small enterprises of companies that are under 15 staff or something, I think it is the statistics.
I mean, the reason you might not be aware of some of our activities, I've mentioned things that are soon to come. So we've been mandated by the BFI to deliver on the 10-point plan, and the 10-point actually has 8 points that we're responsible for. Careers and outreach we work extensively in. Accreditation is something we're talking to HE, FE and also CPD about trying to kite mark some of the training, just so that employers know what to look for, and also participants know what is the badge of honour that's going to be meaningful to the employer. Apprenticeship standards, we have a team specifically at Screen Skills now that are 3 people that are working on that aspect. The skills forecasting piece, we're only just about to start to reveal our results. I used to know a nursery rhyme that got me through the 10 points, 10-point plan. Number 6 is bursaries, so we have £500,000 that we are revising the guidelines and desperately trying to take the brakes off that entry level. Centres of Excellence, I mentioned that we've piloted Leeds. The plan is to get one in each of the nations and then possibly each of the regions, but that is going to take time to build. And those Centres of Excellence, the idea is they become a regional node for our mentoring delivery, our bursary delivery, training in craft and tech. We've got a lot of work around CPD. I mentioned the £600,000 that we've just recently commissioned. And so, all of this is available on the website. I'd also urge you to follow me, follow our feed, sign up to the newsletters, because we have found that people are so time poor in this industry.
Totally.
Unless you catch them at exactly the right moment, with a fresh cup of coffee in their hand at the morning as they sit down in front of their computer. You have to sort of tell people number of times before it really lands. I mean, I had someone very high up at the BFI misquote what we've been doing for the last 6 months, and I'm like, you're supposed to fucking know that. So we are very active about trying to amplify our message and encouraging people to sort of really work with us. And also, I want us to get away we're based in Euston. I want to get us out of that bunker. I'm telling the team that they have to get out to the studios, they have to get out to the locations, they have to go out and get face-to-face time with employers and employees.
In fairness, and I think from, I'm going to speak for Brown Bag, but certainly from what I've heard, I'm very new, I'm speaking for somebody else, obviously, but from what I've heard, they feel that perhaps there isn't enough investment in the Northwest as far as developing our skills and everything, and obviously the fact that there's no training provider up here who's delivering is key to that. Is that potentially?
I've made sure that Rose at Sharp Futures is part of our work that we're doing. She sits on one of our working groups. I've come up to Manchester a couple of times now. Yeah. I've met with your equivalents in council. Yeah. I've been out to see the studios. It's an ambition, we really want to make sure that Screen Skills is out amongst the whole of the nations and regions.
And actually, Screen Skills are in the perfect position to bring FE and apprenticeship providers together to actually almost coordinate the movement.
Well, we that's what we recognise. The problem that I'll be really honest, up until a year ago, we had nowhere near the funding that we'd relied on for so many years. I mean, this is before my time. Yeah. But you look at what the skill set budget was 5-10 years ago, and it's probably to the power of 10 what we're operating with at the moment.
5 sector skills councils have gone bust over the last 2 years.
So we're only just starting to sort of reignite the afterburners and get going again, because we do have this BFI money. And also industry is making their contribution. I mean, we're funded, just so everyone knows, we're funded by two means. There's the money that comes down from National Lottery through the BFI, but we also work with production. So when productions are about to get greenlit, either very early on or sometimes the Friday before the Monday shoot, we work with them, and they make it's voluntary unless you are funded by the BFI Film 4 or the BBC, but there's a contribution into a skills fund, and that equates to in film it's about £1 million a year, in TV it's about 2.5, in animation that's part of the reconstructing of the
probably
skills
about
council.
£3.50. Yeah.
Well, it's gone uncollected for the last 12 months because there hasn't been that person working on it. But as I mentioned earlier, it now comes under my remit, and that's the other thing. If you've got a concern, if you've got a pressure that your organisation's under, I'm reachable. I want to hear, I want to know what's going on out there. I think there's been this sort of us and them mentality a little bit.
I think animation is the subject within the digital creative world that is the most misunderstood by an absolute mile. It's so misunderstood, whether people think it's part of graphic design or art or games or TV and film, and actually just help make it an independent thing that it is, and then be understanding of the individual and their own story, not necessarily what they've been doing, because there were people who bounced around, may have come to it very recently, who are the most incredible person and opportunity for you, and there's people who've been saying they've been doing it for years who still are using Adobe Flash, CS, whatever, but really understand that individual person, and I think the industry needs to come and help us do that an awful lot more. But with animation, because what I get is animation's a little subcategory of something else, and you think, no, it's massive. We've got people to prove it's a real thing. It's a genuine job now. You can do it. It's a real thing. Yeah, it's still. I had the same thing with computer game design and game art maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It took a while for that to be a real thing. Television film has been broadcast and TV has been wonderful for years. It's an established field that it knows what it is. But there's an element of misunderstanding still. And stuff like this is all part of that journey of making it, understanding it.
But even in those very robust spaces like film and TV, the training provision in the last 5-10 years has really dropped away. And I mean, I remember when I was coming up through the ranks, you had time on set for someone to put an arm around the shoulder and say, I wouldn't have done it that way if I was you, or this could change the next time. People had time. But now the schedules and the workflows just being so hyper-accelerated, you don't have that opportunity. So something else does have to come in to replace that.
But we feel we can I'm yet to find the system at whatever level of education. I feel there's an opportunity for a company to ring me on Friday and say, I need someone next week, who have you got? That's what I want to happen in my classroom. That's the best experience an individual can get. We've kind of have it through the mentoring program, because that connection's opened a doorway, an understanding, a two-way understanding of what they need and what we've got, and we almost act like a little bit of an agency sometimes. And I really like that. The students love that, and you go, you know what, you're not in next week. Go and spend some time with Brown Band, go and work with them for a week, and then come back and see how you found it. And that's,
I mean, that notion of agency or the ATA model, you know, we've looked at it and we haven't made a decision yet, but one of the suggestions has been because this, one of the issues is that continuous length of employment over a given period of time and the amount of on and off site training, which is really interesting. The amount of people in the film site, I can only talk about film specifically with regards to this story, but people assume that the off-the-job training that's required by the apprenticeship means they physically have to go and sit in a college somewhere. Off-the-job training could actually be in the production office instead of on the studio floor. So there is some nuancing that can be done there. But it was suggested to us, you know, could we become that long-term employer as an ATA that we then work with them.
It's interesting that you bring that up, and actually you'll see on the slides that's one of the top things that we've put on there is around short-term contracts. So actually, are we just filling a leaking bucket with short-term contracts? It's the industry that we're in, and you mentioned construction earlier, and actually there are some real parallels that we can make with construction as far as short-term contracts are concerned. But I've had these discussions with many other people within the industry around actually how is it affecting talent retention as far as short-term contracts are concerned. To give you an example, I sat not so long ago with one of our designers, young lady who has been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, incredibly talented. Part of my job in learning and development is to map out their short and long-term career goals and see how, whilst they're with us, even under short-term contracts, how I can support that development. And we talked about, I said, 10 years' time, and she said, I won't be in animation in 10 years' time. So you asked the question, well, why won't you be in animation in 10 years' time? Well, because I'm hoping that at some point I might actually be able to buy a house. And I don't know where I'm going to live, and I don't know where this is going to, and there's no stability. So actually I'm going to enjoy it while I can, but I know in 10 years I won't be in it.
You can't not do it for that. Animation, you do it because you enjoy it, and if you're good at it, people will pay you and you'll get some money and pay for these things to be good. But I think the frustration will be there's lots of people who don't go into it ever.
Yes,
because
of that.
Unfortunately, I think, I mean, a lot of industries work like this now. You know, they work on these different level of contracts. The biggest problem in education is the parents. It's absolutely the parents, and sometimes the best parents are the nightmare ones, because they want to get their son or daughter a 12-month yearly salary, which they think, I can get a mortgage this amount about, and inside you're going, they'll make mistakes and they're 20 and they'll gamble and they'll probably be destitute, but you know what, in the end they'll be brilliant, don't worry about it. But that's really easy for me to say because I don't have to watch it happen.
These are the unfortunate vagaries of a lot of what we do. You know, I mean, I have only ever worked freelance or had my own company. I don't know what a staff job looks like or sounds like. I think it's a big barrier to certain parts of society looking at us as an industry,
especially
and
when you look at millennials actually, and there's been some huge statistics done around millennial that age group being risk averse. And actually what we are is it's a risky business.
I mean, you know, it's a high risk play no matter which part of the industry you're in. You know, if you're a producer putting some development funding into something before it's green lit, you're high risk with that. If you're signing up to the fact that you're going to live a freelance life, that's high risk again. I mean, we have been looking at again barriers to entry, and one of the things, especially with the improved lens on diversity and inclusion, is that there are just certain communities that don't look at having a freelance career as having a proper job. It's just not viewed in the same professional way that other trades are.
And that's where potentially, once the animation standards have been published, who knows when that will be, once that's been developed and done, potentially then you could see an apprentice as a solution to that, because typically it'd be an 18-month duration depending on the level of the apprenticeship programme. And what that will do is allow both parties, an apprentice, once they've done their 18 months, to decide then, right, do I continue to pursue a career in the industry? and also from the employer's side, is the individual adding value to my business? And
But the question is, could we offer 18 months to an
Well,
apprentice?
well,
That's
yeah.
the question, is
Yeah,
actually, do
yeah.
we take someone on for 18 months when actually the next series that we've got is only running for 9 months?
Yeah.
So how does that work? Do we, like Gareth suggested, perhaps have a central ATA type setup
Yeah.
where it
Can
becomes
maybe-
a talent share tool
yeah.
with an
More resource.
overarching umbrella of an employer who, you know, is this kind of ivory tower employer who then just farms out talent, but that talent is kept under the security of a
That sort of
single
collective
umbrella.
longevity. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. We talk about the three-year itch at HQ, because one of the things is that, you know, a lot of people look at our industry and go, okay, big, bright, shiny, this is fun, this is different, it's creative, it's frilly cuffs, come in, give it a go. And, you know, they will have possibly gone through education, possibly gone through an apprenticeship, but there is that point in which after 3 years, when your peers are at a certain earning capacity and certain things start to come into consideration, whether it's a better car, whether it's being able to buy a house, afford a wedding, bugger off around the world for a year, whatever it might be,
Yep.
that there's that sort of assessment of, okay, outside of my community of other filmmakers, you know, how's everyone else getting on? And you do at that 3 years have a sort of point of inflection, and it's a worry. It's sort of that retention bit, because we can charge around the country inspiring the next generation, and I could get my 10,000. If we don't keep hold of them,
Absolutely
See, we're
right.
exactly the
That's
same.
just
I mean,
good.
I can draw a profile of every single group of students I've ever had, and you can work out what comes in and what leaves, and what has. I mean, it's a real positive thing, but there's so much more diversity in our classrooms now than ever before, of all different types and kinds, and I include interests and hobbies in that as well, because that defines the personality of the person that comes in. Unfortunately, the ones that are leaving and going on and carrying on are still the same ones like they were 5 years ago, and the ones that fall off are the ones that are more recent, and it is cultural. There is a massive cultural trust issue in there going on.
where I think animation can play to its strengths here a little bit is, I did a schools event up in North London a few weeks back. Notwithstanding the fact I went through 2 metal detectors to get into the assembly room, we talked about opportunities in the screen industry, and we used the example of the King's Speech. And I said, look, on the King's Speech, I employed 456 people. There was 1 director, 1 writer, 4 producers. Everyone else had proper jobs. And we're going to talk about those proper jobs now, because that was the sort of how I'd been asked to pitch to. And I was trying to get people to understand that it's not just about those flashy above the line grades, you know. But the thing is, if you're going through education, acquiring all of this debt now, your way through that is to land one of those big sort of shiny jobs. And the truth is most of us that work in the industry, I still consider myself of the industry, you know, do the sort of the shirt sleeves rolled up, practical work of making, financing, shooting, releasing, exhibiting content. And that isn't just those sort of shiny above the line grades.
The one thing that is a massive positive in that's come on is this appeals to a really broad range of people, and ones who have been excluded from industries before. And I might be talking in my world a minority of numbers, but you scale that up against every single group of students or group of young professionals, and people who, I mean, right now the levels of anxiety and personality disorders as well going through the roof. This actually is perfect for those people, and that needs to be understood as well. And I, in my head, I'm seeing 3 people, and every single one has been or would be rejected by other industries. And there's an opportunity here to do something really amazing, because they will go out and do quite low-level jobs. We've got someone who is non-verbal, medically non-verbal, who is the single best animator and graphic designer I've ever seen. And as long as the people that person goes and deals with understands the disability, my God, there's a potential in that person there.
I mean, we're doing a piece at the moment where we're looking at introducing, we've got 2 pieces of training around neurodiversity that's coming on stream, and there is a challenge there to try and help employers employ outside of the usual pool of people, because, you know, if we are talking about widening the gate and making opportunity more available, then that has to come through educate. It can't just be waggy finger. No. You know, I get really frustrated when people sort of, oh, the film industry, you know, you're all white, middle class, tubby, bald guys. Well, shit. Yes. But no, I get frustrated when it's like, because, okay, well, yes, But if we're widening the gate, we've all got to shift our thinking a little bit, you know. There's a couple of people, young people I've come across recently that probably 10, 15 years ago would have really struggled to have got a job in our industry, whereas now people are a bit more accepting of difference and diversity. So we're trying to make sure that we're equipped to help the employers in terms of how that might work.
Yeah. So how do we think there's going to be anything else that's specifically going to affect us? So on the screen it says Brexit and immigration.
Brexit,
so I don't want to bore everyone with Brexit. I think we're all sick to death of hearing about blooming Brexit. But there is going to be, at some point...
It's a massive challenge. There was a recent piece of work done by the UK Screen Alliance, and it identified in VFX and post something like 36% of the current workforce is non-Indigenous British.
36%.
36%. So come March 2019... you know, unless these frictionless creative visas are implemented or something, there is going to be some massive shortages.
It's great for me.
Right.
It's a great selling point from our point of view. I don't like having to be in this position to do it.
Yeah, there's going to be a gap though, isn't there?
But you know what it does is it highlights that it is actually a thing that people do.
Yes.
And I've had somebody come to me and talk to me about their son and or daughter and speak about Brexit and saying actually it's a positive step for them to go into industry and it's good news. I'm thinking I'm really divided in my head what I feel right now, my morals and my ethics against this opportunity. But should the worst happen, my only thing is how quickly we can respond to the gap.
Well, that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
There's people there ready,
Yeah.
but it's just the bridge, and unfortunately now the bridge is going to have to be as big as it's ever been to meet that gap.
I mean, in every challenge there's always opportunity, isn't there? And this is a biggie that's coming down the... I mean, what do you have a sense of brown bag and what your balance is of workforce? And
well,
what
we like everyone else,
be?
we're on short-term contracts.
Right.
So, yeah, by the time their contract comes to an end, we'll be in that position where we go, right, well, where are they from? And actually, are we going to, you know, have we been optioned for another series? So actually, if their contract, if their visa has come to an end and their contract's come to an end and they can't stay, then they'll just have to go, and we'll have to find them from somewhere else for when the next season is optioned, or whichever way. So it's largely ad hoc. It's making it almost impossible to plan ahead and be proactive. But
and do you like just this isn't meant to put the moderator on the spot, but obviously I'm interested because obviously Brown Bag have made some decisions on who and how they recruit, and you felt that you've needed to go beyond the shores of the UK to find certain. Is it the totality of the worker, or is it specific skills that you...
There weren't applications.
Right.
The talent just wasn't there.
Right.
The talent just wasn't there. So we about 70 people that we brought in. And obviously, everyone here, no doubt, has the same issue. If there are several seasons of series that get optioned at the same time, everyone is being employed at the same time, and there's not that many.
We had it on Flying Machine. So Flying Machine was it was the film after Peter and the Wolf from Breakthrough Films, who did the Van Gogh picture last year. And the idea was it started off as a 30-minute stop frame animation, and then it grew to be a full-length live-action film, but with this stop frame animation at the heart of it. And then they decided to do 24 short films that were all animated as well. And we were having to bring people in from all over the world because it was, for example, specifically for stop frame animators, there is a very small pool of those that have the credits that will excite the director and excite the producers and others. So,
and are they under contract somewhere else at the moment? And if they are,
if they're with Leica or they're with someone else, then
and this is exactly the issue that we have, which I'm sure lots of other people do as well.
Right.
So, you know, it's availability of talent at the time. And, you know, I mean, if we were sitting here and you were all hospitality employers, we'd be having a different discussion. We'd still be concerned about Brexit and immigration, but, you know, there's a much larger talent pool to select people from.
Well, we're trying to look at courses that are, I don't know, it's like sponsors the wrong word because there's no money involved, but working in association with people. We do it across level 3. We're starting it at level 4 as well in animation. And I think they see it as a chance to almost have this ongoing narrative of looking into people, and then in short-term or emergency situations, whilst the student won't be the perfect employee for them, they're going to be a lot better than having nothing there or maybe mouldable. And we want people to guide us on doing it. And I think we even discussed about the idea of make it even shorter term projects, and maybe we do like an 8-week short course where we say, look, we've got Brown Bag involved in doing this, we're going to do things their way.
Yeah.
We're not one for all animation of every single kind. We're going to learn what their studio methods and processes are.
Yeah.
And within it, there's going to be some form of assessment by them. And I think that's got to be looked at a little bit as well. There's these...
It came up at another event, the
Yeah.
idea of foreshortening training and getting it into a more condensed form for a shorter period of time, but then making that qualification being a real badge of honour. Something that we're developing on Hive, which is a sort of part of the website, is the ability for an individual to sort of badge the pieces of training that they've done. So each of the training providers that we work with will then create a badging process, so they have a skills passport that they develop over time. But that idea of sort of condensing it down to the real nuts and bolts of what you need within that short space of time is being looked at.
It's very possible, but it's probably more possible at level 4, 5 and 6
Yeah.
than it is within other levels. But that's... I'm having ideas while I'm sat here and trying to make notes in my head right now. But
The notion of a
and
finishing
studios
school was
do work
something
very,
that
very
was-
differently. It's not just the 2D, 3D thing. You know, I mean, obviously we're a large studio. We've got a pretty much an 11-point pipeline process. If you're hired as an animator at Brown Bag, you're an animator at Brown Bag. You're not doing any design. You're not doing rigging. You're not doing any compositing. You are an animator, and that's what you do.
But in a smaller shop, that one body could actually
Could
end
be
up
doing 3 or
embodying-
4
Right.
of those stages of the pipeline. Yeah, absolutely. So actually a smaller body, if they hired an animator from Brown Bag and all they've done is animate at Brown Bag, that's all they've done at Brown Bag is animation. They can't make the assumption that they'll have done a bit of rigging and they'll have done a bit of this and a bit of that, because that's just not the way our pipeline works. So yeah, there perhaps should be a little bit more transparency around how
there should be,
each
because
company
also
works.
we have a lot of younger students who do everything. They get to sample everything. They want to be the director. They want to be the lead. They want to be on top. And in fact, actually, that's just not realistic in most cases. But I think if you were to be very clear and be
Something that
trained
we
for
do
that level.
internally, however, from a learning and development perspective, is our observational study programme. So we actually put our juniors, so people who've come, grads who have come straight out of university, they might be on scene setup or background, they will then go over 8 weeks. They do a 16-hour programme. No, it's extended now to 20 hours. They do a 20-hour programme where they spend time shadowing and doing an overview of each and every stage of our pipeline, so they can understand how it goes from concept through script, storyboard, and all the way through right up to post. So they can understand the entire journey from a Brown Bag perspective, because actually for us as a business, it means that they're a better employee because they understand their impact on the entire pipeline of our series, but also they understand other people's impacts on their job. So that's how we work, and perhaps if a lot of other employers did something similar, then it would be beneficial. Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Can I apply?
Okay. Have we got another slide? Are we done?
Oh, we're
running over. My goodness.
We can carry
There
on,
we
just
go.
not with the cameras and the sound.
Yeah,
and the
we're
lights.
running over. Right, well, this is pretty much it. So moving forward, a close and call to action. Is there anything that we've decided that we can do? What can we do? Come on.
I need to come and visit Brown Bag because I haven't seen your studio, and on that trip I'd like to try and check in with a couple of other employers that are up here to get a sense of the landscape. I mean, from the audience perspective, please keep in touch with Screen Skills, pick up the phone if you have a complaint or a congratulatory word. Talk to us. We are really, really keen to make sure that we're engaged with the industry. And we will be talking about animation trainees as part of the 2019 cohort.
Great stuff. Have we got time to open it up to questions, or are we?
Maybe one quick one.
One really amazing question.
Yeah, one
The best
amazing
question
Catch
question.
of
the
the
whole
day.
spirit of the room.
Now,
Well, we've got one amazing question. No pressure. Yeah.
Hiya, Una from BBC Bite Size.
Hiya.
Listening to what you were saying about training pathways, I wonder what the panel thinks of the potential T-level pathway, the level 3 qualification that's apprenticeships and college-based and work experience-based, and potentially so the DFE say they're going to majorly market to parents so that that young people are taking it up. Like, is that a potential answer, or is animation so specific that you think that route will be lost within the pathways?
and as it is, there's a barrier before that right now, in that the nature of the way T-levels are working is that most of the creative digital will fall under the applied general pathway anyway, so we're not going to be part of the T-level specifications. And certainly if it comes down to a choice for a college particularly, they're not going to choose it until it's established and running and working, because there's an easier option that can be done next to it.
Would it not be in digital? No?
Well, the digital one, I'm not sure animation will... You would teach it...
Animation is in the trade and media pathway.
You would probably choose the applied general as a centre, which is just, I'm not saying I like it, but it's probably where we're going to go.
That's going to go.
Yeah, applied
Yeah.
general.
Money for that is going.
Applied general isn't a T-level
Okay, all right,
pathway.
okay.
They're all vocational sectors. So yeah, but it sounds like the it doesn't sound like the sort of the information is very clear anyway of what it's going to be. So.
Yeah, so that's pretty much answered the
The
question.
information
yeah.
is quite foggy at the moment, and there's a lot of development work to be done. And I think, you know, the fact that government have recognised that the take up with the parents has to really land for it to become meaningful, that's something that will take years in its gestation. And I think what the animation sector is saying very, very clearly as of today, and have been for the last 2 years, we need people now. And another bright, shiny initiative that may deliver something in 3 years, brilliant, fill your boots. But what we really need is boots on the ground at the moment.
Yeah, dead right. Lovely. Thank you very much. Right, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Did I come up to that?